When it comes to weight loss, no two people are the same. That's why Noom builds personalized plans based on your unique psychology and biology. Take Brittany. After years of unsustainable diets, Noom helped her lose 20 pounds and keep it off.
I was definitely in a yo-yo cycle for years of just losing weight, gaining weight, and it was exhausting.
And Stephanie. She's a former D1 athlete who knew she couldn't outtrain her diet, and she lost 38 pounds.
My relationship to food before Noom was never consistent.
And Evan, he can't stand salads, but he still lost 50 pounds with Noom.
I never really was a salad guy. That's just not who I am. Even through the pickiness, Noom taught me that building better habits builds a healthier lifestyle. I'm not doing this to get to a number. I'm doing this to feel better.
Get your personalized plan today at Noom.com. Real Noom users compensated to provide their story. In 4 weeks, the typical Noom user can expect to lose 1 to 2 pounds per week. Individual results may vary.
People very often ask me both how and why I started my podcasting journey. Well, as an engineer, I'm frankly very passionate about math. I wanted to find somewhere to share stories of great mathematicians from Archimedes to Alan Turing and everyone in between. And for that reason, I want to tell you a little bit about my preferred hosting platform, which is Zencastr. Now, before I continue, this is usually the conversation I have with anybody who is wanting to start their own podcast. I know there are so many people out there with passions that they want to share with the world or unique knowledge that they're just looking for a platform to start with. And Zencastr is a wonderful all-in-one platform. What I mean by that is you can do your recording and your editing and use AI to create a transcript and distribute to all platforms, including Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere else where podcasts are played. For anybody like me who might worry at first about what you might sound like on an audio recording, Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound really, really smooth. It automatically removes any of the ums or ahs in your recording. It removes any of the awkward pauses in conversations, and it also helps you to set the right podcast loudness and levels while reducing any background noise, all with the click of a button. It couldn't be easier. Go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code BREAKINGMATH, and you'll get 30% off your first month in any Zencastr paid plan. I want you to have the same easy experience I do for all my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
I'm Sophia.
I'm Meryl.
And this is Chivalry is Dead, problem episode 10 of Breaking Math. This is on a series of episodes where we're going to talk about knight and knave problems, right?
So the idea of the knight and knave problem is that we have three characters we're working with. We have the knight, who always tells the truth, the knave, who always lies, and the spy, who doesn't always lie, but might at random. And so this is an example of a logic problem that you might see if you took, say, a computer science discrete math class. So I've seen this problem before. I won't claim to be good at it, but we're going to work through some of them.
Yeah, and you usually have a limited number of questions you could ask, or you could only ask one person, or you could ask them one at a time, or something like that, right? All right, so we full disclosure, we recorded a little bit of this episode, like 5 minutes worth, before we realized that I wasn't recording in the episode. But Meryl, you haven't done many of these problems, like you said, right?
Right, and of course I've seen them. I have the exposure. These problems in particular, I have not.
Yeah, and I found a whole slew of them on popularmechanics.com, and we're going to be going with, we're going to be reviewing those problems. They're the riddles of the week. They have to do with knights and knaves, and they're really fun to work through, and we're going to be doing that on these series of problem episodes. So let's begin. So Meryl, you have a knight and a knave in front of you, right? You have a knight and knave in front of you, and they're in front of two doors, right?
Okay.
The doors are identical, and you don't know who's the knight and who's the knave. One door leads to $50,000 cash. The other door leads to a spiky land of spikes. You don't want to go into it. So what question, you can ask one of them one question. What is the question that you would ask to figure out which door is which? Oh, and they're each in front of a door.
Let's start off with something and say we want to figure out which one is a knight or a knave. That doesn't get us all the way, but what if we asked, what would the other person say that I would say I am.
Right? Okay, so let's see if we ask that to the knight, right? You ask the knight, what would the other person say that you would say that you are? The knave would say that the knight would say that the knight is the knave, right?
So knight would say knave?
Yeah, so the knight would say the other person would say that I would say that I'm a knave. Whereas the knave would say what?
So the knave then would say that the other person who's the knight would say, I'm the knight.
So yeah, let's say you ask the knave, what would the other person say that you say that you are? The knight would say that the knave would say that he's the knight, right?
The knight would say, because he's telling the truth and the other person is the knave, so he would say the truth then, that the knave would say that he's the knave. Or wait, this gets tricky.
Yeah. Okay. So let's start. Let's start
The
with
knight. No. I got it.
Cool.
So the knight would say that the knave would say that the knight would say he's a knave.
Yep. Because
So
he's telling the truth about a liar, right?
Right. So in the end, knight says knave.
Yeah. And if we ask the knave, what would happen?
So he would say that the knight would say that he would say he's a knight, and that would be the lie.
Yeah. The knave would say that he's the knight. So the knight would say that he would say that he's the knight.
So basically, you're asking someone what the other guy say. What would the other guy say that I would say I am?
Oh, wait. Actually, let me simplify the question. What would the other person say that they are? I think that's a simpler one. So let's consider the question. What would the other person say that they are?
Okay, so let's start with the knight. So if you ask the knight what would the other person say they are, then the knight would say that the other person would be the knave.
Yeah, would say that but remember the other person would lie, right? So the knight is going to tell the truth about the lie, and say that the other person is going to say that they're the knight, right?
Oh, I see.
And if you ask the knave, what would happen? The knave would lie about the truth, right?
Right. So the knight would say that he's a knight. So the knave would lie about that and say that
he'd say he's a knave.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a question that you can use to distinguish these two, right?
Yeah. And so what we get then is that the knight would answer knave to that question, and the knave would answer knight.
Oh, no, the knave would also answer knave, actually. But we are actually getting weirdly closer. Because think about it now. You're getting them to tell you the same answer to a question. That's progress, right?
I suppose it is.
Because we have this mechanism, right, of the truth teller telling the truth about a lie being the same as a lie being a lie about a truth teller they're the same thing, right?
Right. This actually is quite confusing to me, I'm not gonna lie.
Alrighty, so let's modify the question a little bit. What would the other person say?
I feel like at this point you could just ask the person, do you exist?
Oh no, but not even asking them if they. But yeah, and the knave would say no to that, and the knight would say yes, right? So we know which one is which with that question, but we also don't know which door leads to the cache, right?
Right. We still haven't solved that problem.
So consider the question: would the other person say that the world exists?
So the knight would say. So the knight would say that the knave would lie about that. So the knight would say the knave would say no.
Uh-huh.
But the knave, knowing the other person is the knight, knows that the knight would say yes, so the knave would also say no.
Yeah, so do you notice that we're able to ask them a question now? Now it doesn't matter who we ask, we are able to ask them a question about the universe. So like we would say, so if we consider the question, because now we're getting no's to yeses, right? So would the other person say that nothing exists?
So the knight would say that the knave would say yes to that. And the knave would also say that the knight would say yes to that. So, yep, you're right.
So now how would you encode a question about the door into this? Because remember, you could if you could ask them just questions about the world now, you have a template, right?
Right. So we could ask something that is constant about the doors then.
How about just a direct question?
So we could ask something along the lines of, so what if we asked what's behind the door the knight is standing behind?
What's behind the door that the knight is standing behind? Oh, you could actually absolutely ask that, and then but think about this: if the knight is in front of the good door, right?
Yeah.
The knight would say that the knight is standing in front of the good door, right? Whereas the knave would say that the knight is not, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah, so we still don't have any more information about that because based on the yes or no, we still don't know exactly. But consider this. Would the other person say that the world exists? If they say no, it's yes. Would the other person say that nothing exists? Would the other person say that a cheeseburger costs $1 million?
So we could ask something along the lines of, would the other person say that they're standing in front of the good door?
All right, so yeah, so if you ask the knight, would the other person say they're in front of the good door? If the other person is in front of the good door, they're going to say no, right?
Right. So we kind of have to build out our truth table here. So let's say the knight is standing in front of the good door. Then the knight would say that the knave... So the knight would say that the knave would say that he's standing in front of the good door.
Yeah, exactly. And if you ask...
So if you ask the knave, so the knave knows that the knight's standing in front of the good door. So the knave would say that the other person who's the knight would say that he's not standing in front of the good door.
Exactly. So whatever answer you get is going to be a lie, right?
That sounds right.
Yeah, so because if you swap it around and the knave is in front of the good door, the knight's going to say that the knave says he's not in front of it, and the knave is going to say that the knight is going to say that he is in front of it, right?
So can we conclude from this then that the knight would say, wow, this trips me up for some reason.
All right, so let's do a truth table. Let's say the knight is in front of the good door. Knight equals good, knave equals bad, and then the second scenario is knight equals bad, knave equals good. All right, so if the knight is in front of the good door, if you ask the knight that question, what are they going to say that the knave is going to say he's in front of?
So the knight would say the knave would say that he's in front of the good door.
And what would the knave say?
So the knave would say that the knight would say he's in front of the bad door.
Right. So both of those questions are exactly the opposite of the truth. I mean, the answers. Now let's do the second scenario. The knight is in front of the bad door and the knave is in front of the good door this time.
So the knight would say that the knave would say he's in front of the bad door.
Exactly. And the knave would say what?
The knave would say that the knight would say he's in front of the good door.
Yep. And so since every scenario that we could put in, and no matter who we ask the question, we get exactly the opposite of the truth, how would we know how to get the truth from this, right?
Right. So...
And since you know which knight, and since you know that, and since you see them standing in front of the doors right in front of you, all you have to do is say, would the other person say that you're in front of the bad door? If they say yes, then you go in. If you say no, then you go to the other door.
I see.
Yeah, it's a famous problem because there's so many like little things at play, you know?
Mm-hmm. And I don't quite know what it is. I think it's the way that you're trying to find the question when you know the answers that just makes this ever so tricky to me. It's a little bit, what's the word? A posteriori.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's why I also really like these problems is because they really like give you a sense of how to solve certain questions in logic. Ready to move on to our second and final problem? You have 3 people in front of you. One is dressed in red, one in blue, and one in green, right?
So far, so good?
The guy in the red says that the guy in the blue is the spy, right?
Right.
The guy in the blue says that the man in green is the spy.
Okay.
And the guy in the green says that the blue dude is the spy.
Got it.
All right, so red accuses blue, blue accuses green, and green accuses blue.
So in this case, we don't need to ask any questions. We just need to determine which person is which and see if it fits the logic, and it should play out.
Yeah, because you know that there's one spy, one knave, and one knight. Now I'll give you a quick little hint. Both red and green say that blue is the spy, right?
Right. So blue and green, red and green are both. So red and green are both saying that blue is the spy.
Yep. So one of them has to be lying, right? Or at least not telling the truth. So why don't I just plug in some stuff and test?
Right. So basically, they're either both lying or they're both telling the truth.
Or one of them is a spy. Okay. Oh yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's say
And if they're both lying, we know who the knight is. If they're both telling the truth, we know who the knave is.
So let's assume the blue dude is a spy. Oh wait, if the guy in blue is saying if the guy in blue is a spy, right? Red and green are saying that blue is a spy, right?
Right. So if blue is the spy, then red and green are both telling the truth, but that doesn't work because one of them would have to be the knave.
Yep. And so we reach a contradiction. So let's say the guy in green is a spy, right? Let's say the guy in blue is telling the truth, and let's just say the guy in green is a spy, right?
Okay, so if green is a spy, he could either be lying or telling the truth.
Yeah, which means that red and blue must be the knight and knave.
And so red is saying that blue's the spy, and blue is saying that green is the spy.
Yeah, so if
red
continue.
So red would be lying, and blue would be telling the truth. And so red's the knave, blue's the knight.
Awesome. So we know that at least satisfies the problem, right?
Right.
But do we know there's no contradiction, but do we know that it's the only thing that solves the problem, right?
Right, so let's keep trying.
All right, so let's see. If red is the spy.
So red could be either lying or telling the truth. So blue is saying that green is the spy, and green is saying that blue is the spy, but both of those would be lies. So there we have a contradiction.
Yeah, and so we've shown that green has to, that the only color for the spy is green, right?
That seems to be the case.
And if green is the spy, then we know what red and blue are, right?
Right.
So just to spell it all out, green is the spy, red is the knave, and blue is the knight. And since that's the sole condition, since green is the spy is the condition upon which we know that red and blue are the knave and the knight respectively, and we know that spy can't be anything but green, we know that this is the only solution, right?
Right.
So Meryl, I know this was a short episode, but did you learn anything?
I think I stretched my brain a little. So, in that case, I learned a little bit more about trying to at least set up logic such that you can solve problems where you might. So at least I learned a little bit more about how you can, set up problems such that the outcome will be what you want, and you can test our hypotheses like this.
Exactly. I couldn't have, yeah, exactly. It's one of the awesome things about doing these little puzzles is that, like you said, they stretch your brain. So I'm on Twitter at SciPodSophia. Oh, Sophia with an F.
And I'm on Twitter as FuturePodMeryl.
And Breaking Math is on Twitter at Breaking Math Pod. Don't forget to interact with us if you would like to send us questions, comments, say what you liked, didn't like about an episode. And of course, our posters are on Facebook.com/Breaking Math Podcast. Just click on shop.